is about Verges as nature reserves. We've got 5 people that are just going to talk a bit about this from their own point of view. We've got Martin Draper from On the Verge and 1 Metre Matters, who is going to talk about projects in and around Talgarth. We've got Alison Alexander going to talk about this, the project they have in Llanfachlin. Rolly B will talk about a bit about what is happening in Prestine, and then we have 2 people talking more about it, not from a community point of view, but from a wider perspective about Verges as nature reserves. We've got Sorrenta King from Radnor Wildlife Trust and Fiona Stone from Radnor Wildlife Trust talking about that particular perspective. So we'll start. What we're going to do is each speaker will talk for sort of up to 10 minutes, and then there will be questions after each person has finished speaking. So that's how we'll run it. And to start off with, then I will introduce Martin Draper from On the Verge and 1 Metre Matters. So Martin, can I hand over to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy, and welcome to everybody in the meeting. My name is Martin Draper, and I'm chair of a long-standing constituted volunteer group called On the Verge. We initially started in 2017 as an idea to do rafts of wonderful wildflowers on verges throughout our immediate areas. And we did some unbelievably wonderful assumptions of natures and disasters within the first 12 months. We very soon came to the conclusion that around where I live, that the whole point of nature, the bigness of it, was too much for a lot of people to take in. And we were having brickbats thrown at us for quite a number of sessions trying to establish a verge. So we then looked at talking to a lot of the residents and other groups as well. What we found out quite early on was that the environment as a thing is too big a question and a subject for people to think about or get their heads around it. So they don't do anything because they don't know what to do. And very quickly we were asked to take part in the Section 6 of the Wales Environmental 2018 Act, and we were asked to attend that meeting nearly 2 years ago now. And we were discussing with people about how we could make helping the environment to be a lot more easier on their decision-making processes and their practices. So we came up with something called 1 Metre Matters, which is, instead of thinking about the whole of the environment, and this is like, you're looking at the world being a disaster area, and that's too much for some people. So we've said, right, okay, with our experience, we can give you practical advice via our website and meetings and so on about just using 1 metre. And you don't even need to grow things. You can just put a pile of logs there or upturn pots and things. And it's basically the only reason 1 metre matters is that we are talking about increasing the insect population. So we've been into schools and councils and talked about Section 6 and done practical exercises and so on. One of the things that we picked up on fairly early on was we started to talk to Peter Kahn, who's the professor of psychology in Washington, D.C. And Professor Kahn in 1969 coined the phrase, and we should be aware of it, is environmental generational amnesia. And very basically, it's just that the people are born into that generation and they accept what the environment is like and degenerate it further. They're influenced by what's happened in the past since, the Industrial Revolution in the UK at 1790. In 235 years, we've had constant degradation of the environment. What we're trying to do, and we've done it through children with organising organic veg growing, is to get them to have a relationship with the soils again. And what we've found is that they've started, the children who are between 5 and 10, 11, 12 have started to educate their parents about things. For instance, when we were talking about planting potatoes last year in September, two or three of the children didn't know what the potatoes were or what they were for. And when we actually said that you can make chips out of them, the light went on, and we did some, when we harvested them towards Christmas, we did some air fried chips, and it changed the way that they perceived things to do. So we talk about the environment to those who want to listen, but more often than not, we point them towards 1 meter matters, because if 3% of the UK population planted one pollinator flower plant, it would completely change where we are in our environmental status. We're talking, and then it goes a bit further than that, in that we've been invited to go to Birmingham National Parks Authority next week to talk about our interest in looking at the relationship between mycelia and human well-being, and how does that work, and what are the statistics for 1 meter matters within that mycelia range. So there's lots of in-depth stuff that we're doing, as well as giving away free flower seeds for people to do some annual or perennial things. What we're actually all about is trying to have lots of people doing lots of things rather than a few people doing a big thing. For instance, when we first started, we had a wildflower meadow in town in Talgoth, and there was only 3 to 4 people that are actually looking after that. Whereas 1 meter matters, the take up of that has been nearly 3,000 people that are working on that things, not just in Wales but throughout the UK. We've got lots of other events going on with people outside of Powys, outside of Wales and UK wide. So we'd say to people, encourage you to look at our website. We're a volunteer group, so we don't ask for payment about anything. It's about improving our environmental and insect population. But what we primarily do is go into places and just have a chat and talk about things, and then see where we go from there. I think that's about it, really. I don't think there's anything else. I'll wait for the questions to come up when everybody else has done there. But if that's okay.
Okay.
Sorry, that's only about 5 or 6 minutes, Jeremy.
That's fine. Thanks, Martin. I've got a question to start with, but then there probably will be other questions. So can you just say a bit more about what 1 meter matters is? Is it an organisation that's based in Talgarth that operates over a wider area, and how do people get involved with 1 meter matters?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't explain that right, and the reason I didn't explain that right is because this has been my life for a long time, so I'm auto know what I mean. So we've got the constituted group is called On the Verge. 1 meter matters is a trademarked bit of On the Verge, if that makes any sense. So it's an idea that we trademarked and have got an image on it that is recognised. So we have 2 groups. We have the steering group for On the Verge to say where we're going, and then we have another group that manages and supports 1 meter matters. It's a completely free thing, and it's just about getting the information out there. For instance, 1 or 2 of our people on the 1 meter matters side would talk about just plant pots, and if you turn them upside down, what the implications of that in your garden. There's an implication there to attract slow worm and wood lice and all sorts of stuff. So 1 meter matters is part of On the Verge, which is the registered volunteer organisation.
And that's an organisation that's based in Talgarth. So you have a committee or a steering group or something in Talgarth.
Well, the steering group is sort of pan wide now. I mean, the only reason it's called On the Verge Wales is because we live in Talgarth. I personally live in Talgarth, but it started with a few people in Talgarth, but we've only got probably 4 people on the steering committee group in Talgarth, and the rest it's sort of mushroomed and panned out, if that makes any sense.
Okay, but if I wanted, for instance, to get assistance for doing more things in Montgomery, I could come to you, and what assistance?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, if you go onto the website, and there's a contact page there that comes through to our messaging to our email, and we respond that way. But there's Facebook pages as well, and all sorts of ways of getting involved.
out of interest, are you on the Eggin network, and can people get assistance from you via Eggin? Just wondering.
I actually have written that down because I think that's a fact. I've never heard of that. And I think that's really useful. One of the reasons I like to go and chat to people is to find out more about about collaborations and people helping and so on. So that egging is a really of an interest to us. But I didn't know anything about it until just.
Okay, it sounds as if it might be appropriate so that you could actually then be able to go and support other communities.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been hogging the microphone. Has anyone else got any questions they want to raise on that at the moment?
There's Fiona in the chat, Jeremy, asking for clarification about the meter. It's not necessarily literally Verges then, is it?
Right. Do you want to go ahead then, Fiona? Yep. Go on, Fiona.
Sorry, I had the microphone off. I thought the question would be okay. So your 1 meter matters is not, you're not talking about the meter of the verge, that right of way space.
Yeah.
It is a meter in your garden or a.
Just to explain to about 1 meter matters is that we started with 1 square meter, but it doesn't matter where you have it. It's now come to be assumed that 1 meter matters means just a small space really. So you can put it into, we put it into hanging baskets, we put it into planters on flats in Birmingham, we put it on, people say, well, even sometimes for some people, 1 square meter is too much as well. So we just say, get a plant pot, turn it upside down and just leave it. And that's it, attracting insect population. So yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer, but it's a start to a conversation for people to do small actions, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. And Andy Gill, you've put that BBC are supporting 1 meter matters. Can you just expand on that a bit more? I can't hear you, Andy. Don't know whether but you're not muted by the look of it. It's strange. I can't hear you, but it doesn't indicate that your microphone is muted.
You may need to check which microphone the computer is linked into, Andy.
Yeah, we're not hearing you, I'm afraid.
We can pass on the question on his behalf, can't we, sort of, by asking if there's a connection with the BBC.
I can actually hear you, Andy.
Oh, you can hear Andy, but none of the rest of us can.
Yes.
That's very strange.
Perhaps it's telepathic, maybe.
Yeah, do you want to just put a bit more in the chat then, maybe, Andy, if you've. Right, I can't see any more hands up at the moment. So shall we move on now to, so thank you very much, Martin, for that. That's very interesting. We'll move on now to our next speaker. So Alison Alexander is from Llanfachlin, and where they have a Verge project there. So Alison, can I hand over to you for your presentation, please?
Yes, hello, morning all. So I'm a member of a local environmental action group called Brace, that's building resilience against climate emergency. We're based in Llanfachlin, but operate in the surrounding area as well. And I can see Leslie and Gary from Brace are on the call as well. Hi. So we're an unincorporated association with charitable purpose, and we exist to educate people about the climate emergency and give people an outlet for doing something about it locally. So we run all sorts of projects. We have a repair cafe that we run in conjunction with Oswestry XR. We have a library of things, a community garden, a community fridge. There's a clothes swap just starting. We hold talks, we've done workshops, we've done mini festivals in one of our green spaces, and then one of our projects is a Verge project. So I've got some pictures of it, but I'll explain to you a bit about it first. So it's a very long verge, but I'm terrible at remembering numbers, probably, I don't know, 100 meters or something. Very steep bank, right at the entrance to town. It's the main road in. And for a long time, one of our members in particular had been very keen to see something floristic happen on it. And we had a couple of members who were on the town council's biodiversity committee as well. And so between Brace and the town council, there was a lot of enthusiasm for doing something with it. After lots of discussion, we decided to try and recreate a natural verge for this area, sort of representative of the kinds of flowers you would get in wildflower meadows around, very broadly, very broadly. So what I mean by that is that we decided that anything we put on the verge from this point on would be naturally occurring in the local area. And if we used any seed, we would make sure it was of local provenance, that sort of thing. I sort of say broadly because some planting had already happened there. You'll see there are some daffodils there, and some primroses, which aren't quite the right colour. And one of the discussions that we really had to get around early on was whether it was the right place for this sort of project, or whether people would want something sort of much more, you know, Bournemouth by the sea, or and it wasn't easy to find agreement on that. And I think it's fair to say that some people would rather have something like Bournemouth, you know.
Yeah.
So recently we've done a bit more planting to try and make a bit more of an impact, staying true to our principles, but we'd hoped we wouldn't have to plant so much. So I'll start sharing my screen so you can see what we've been up to. There we are. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. So yeah, this gives you an impression of how long the bank is. It really is quite massive. and it's shallow at one end, getting to well over 3 meters at some points. And the one picture, of course, I couldn't find today was just how grassy it was. You know, that sort of really overgrown, thick, rank, coarse grass that you get when meadows haven't been cut properly, they haven't had their thatch removed and all of that. So first of all, and this was back in 2019, we started. We thought we'll start cutting and removing the biomass to try and reduce the fertility and open up the conditions for wildflowers, and then we'll see how we go. I was very nervous about this because I'm aware of a landowner not far from here who took 15 years of cutting and removing to create a wildflower rich meadow, and I was aware that you know, some residents, patients may not hold out for 15 years, but anyway, we thought we'd go for it. And but we did sow some yellow rattle seed locally collected also in the first year. Hopefully, is this going to move on? It's not moving on. Oh, there we are.
Yep, it has.
Okay, so this is just in February of this year. Delightful weather it was not. And this is when we decided that we'd do some plug planting. So we were fortunate to have a grant from Powys County Council's local nature places for nature fund. They granted us £1,000 to buy some more yellow rattle seed and plant plugs. So that's us doing that. And this is what I took yesterday. So obviously it's not the best time of year for that. You can see some of the original daffodils that have been planted, and you know, not to criticize them, they create a nice splash, as do some of the primroses. They're yeah, we have also, as planting, we've just planted a load of native daffodils as well, which actually haven't come up yet. So perhaps they'll be a bit later, or maybe we'll have to wait till next year. These are pictures I've taken over the last couple of years. And you can see that I think this is one of the slightly earlier ones. It really is quite grassy, but nevertheless, we're getting some interesting plants coming through. And then more recently, we've got patches, not the whole thing, but patches, which are looking much more dense with wildflowers rather than grasses. And we're getting quite a nice mixture of plants. In fact, I put a list together. Hopefully you can still see that while I'm reading out my list, because I'll never remember it all. So I did a little log last year, and we've got common dog violet, cowslip, daffodil, foxglove, common vetch, bindweed. There we are. Some insects love it. Narrow-leaved plantain or ribwort plantain, birdsfoot trefoil, yellow rattle, of course, meadow buttercup, common knapweed, common sorrel, common vetchling, fox and cubs, fieldwood rush, lesser stitchwort, lots of that, which is lovely. Yarrow, broadleaf dock, speedwell, meadow sweet, some ragwort, a little bit of nettle, which we have to keep on top of, some hogweed, and an array of grasses and some ferns coming through, which I didn't spend time trying to decide which ones they were. And key to all of this, of course, has been all the people. So we have a really good crew. This is our first work party. Oh, it's gone black. Stop sharing. Let me try and get that back. So yeah, right from the beginning, we've had a lot of support and plenty of volunteers out, which has been really lovely. And these, you can see, they're absolutely critical to every event is tea and cake. We have some lovely homemade cake to encourage people out. We get some really good numbers every time. And you can see Gary here, who's on the call. And as I think it's partly is inspired by this project, maybe Gary will correct me. He and another member called David Grandeth have started another Verge project in the town on their housing estate, which is quite a large area to deal with. So a similar thing is going on over there now. Would anybody like to ask me some questions?
Okay, thanks very much, Alison. That's brilliant. So I'll ask the first question, and then we'll see what else comes in. So yes, it's quite a, as you said, it's quite a steep bank, which means that I can see it's almost impossible to cut with a machine. So is that going to involve a lot of volunteer labour every year? And do you see that as being a problem, or do you think that will be something you can get people to do because it's on an ongoing basis?
People seem to be keen to do it. We haven't had any trouble getting at least 6 people, if not more like 10 or 12 out for most sessions. It's not hugely time consuming. You know, it's getting less, of course. Some years we've cut twice to really try and knock the grass back, but it is working already. And there will come a point where we're taking less and less off, and it won't be a great deal at some point. Yeah, no signs of lack of enthusiasm yet. And it is looking more of a display. I'd say I'd be surprised if we're there yet this summer, but I would expect another couple of years it could start looking really quite nice.
Can you remind me how many years it's been?
Yeah, so we're into our 6th year now.
Right, okay, so it's a decent time. Thanks. Any other questions?
And actually, on time, sorry, it's generally one of these cutting sessions is taking about taking a Saturday morning, you know, maybe between 2 and 4 hours, depending on how many people turn out. So not a big commitment either.
Okay.
Hi, Alison. Okay, Alison, I'm biodiversity officer in Kerry, and I just want to ask you, that bank you've been working on, who does it belong to? Is it Powys County Council or Clonbrasher?
It's Powys County Council, I think, and we had to have an agreement with Highways for it because some of it is just outside the 40-mile-an-hour boundary.
Right.
Which was straightforward. We dealt with Andy Jackson, I think. He was very happy to mark it off on a map, and we got immediate agreement for the council to cut it. What was it? It was to miss the first cut and the second cut. I think they cut in September, so they'll come along with their sort of flail type cutter first, and then we'll go in afterwards with strimmers and scythes.
Right, that is really helpful. We've got a bank right in the middle of Kerry, opposite the shop, very steep, and I've only been on the council a year, but every time I ask about, oh, we've had problems with the Powys in the past, health and safety, working on it, which I find very frustrating. I don't know who to go to try and get this sorted out. Would it be Andy Jackson?
I would try him. He was very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had to. I can't remember if we had to show our insurance documents. Not sure. Probably not, actually. We just had to agree to, you know, health and safety practices. You'll see us in high-vis jackets. You know.
Right. Okay, that's really helpful. It gives me courage to go forward, because I've had sort of barriers put up. Oh, well, we've had problems. I think, well, no, let's go on with this. That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Eva. Fiona, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
I was only going to ask probably a very similar question to Eva. How much pressure is not quite the right word, but how much liaison did you have to do with Powys to get them to agree to let go of their cutting regime?
It was, well, it wasn't me who did it, and it was a while ago, so my memory is poor on it, but I'm pretty certain Jackie had a telephone call with them, and there was an exchange of a couple of emails. It really wasn't
a big deal
at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's Powys still, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Like, I wonder whether Ben Mullen would be of help. Probably. He's the officer that we have dealt with for the local places for nature funding. He's incredibly helpful and really keen to encourage communities to do this sort of thing.
I want to ask a question.
Yes, go on, Penny.
I have my house is on the A483, and I have a strip outside my house, and I had already thought how lovely it would be to have wildflowers, meadow flowers there. From the sound of things, as an individual, I couldn't do that just on my strip of land. Is that right?
It's
really land that belongs to the A483.
I don't think you would have a problem. I would just call highways again. I remember we have some other strips around our village, and way back when I spoke to, I don't know that it was Andy, but highways, yeah, they just said just mark on a map where you'd like to take over the management. We're very happy for it to happen. So I think you probably could.
Right. Well,
is this related to this point, Fiona? Do you want to come in?
Yes, I heard, because we've been talking about it in a different group, and I heard that if you put 2 white sticks, the council will avoid between the two. But I think if it's the A road, it is highways, it's not the council. I think the difficulty comes when it's subcontracted out and there's a sort of like a connected communication. I don't know, but because we've had people saying, well, you know, I've planted this and then they've come and cut it all down and so on. I don't know. I just offer that as this point of 2 white posts between which you don't want them to touch. Andy, do you remember that conversation that we had?
I don't remember that particular one. I think Tom Brown in Machynlleth has an individual arrangement with Powys County Council, an informal arrangement, rather than we gave up on trying to get it declared as a roadside nature reserve, didn't we? But yes. I'm sceptical about the white sticks, because I've got a case here which is very rural. It's just a single track lane with some orchids on it, and I've had communication with Ben in Powys, and I speculated, or maybe in the end I need to put some sticks up, and he didn't say, oh yeah, just go and do it. He said, oh, I'll come out next time in the area and we can discuss it. I think the white sticks would fall foul of the tractor coming around and not being briefed on it, and then just
it was Tom and the orchids that were in my mind, and they had come. I know that people have been very upset because there was a lovely verge of orchids and they'd just been completely raised to the ground.
Yeah,
So
no, I don't think just a DIY white sticks is sufficient in that situation.
yeah, no, I was trying to be positive, but
Good trying. Jeremy, we've got a hand from Polly and one other question in the
That's
chat.
right. Rolly, do you want to come in? Is this related to the white sticks?
Sorry, no, it's just that quite a few things I'll be saying will actually answer some of these questions to a certain extent.
All right. Okay, that sounds good.
About council and who owns. So.
Okay. Well, is it appropriate, as I don't see any other hands at the moment, that we introduce you then, Rolly, just
Jeremy,
to
Jeremy.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a question from Andy Gill. How did you get community involvement?
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Shall we take this first then? So, yes. Can we hear you now, Andy? Do we know? No, we can't still hear you. So, but no, that's fine. You've got the question in chat. So, are you able to answer that, Alison?
Yes, community involvement. Well, Brace has quite a number of members. I think we have about 80 people at least on our mailing list, and I do the publicity for Brace events generally, and anything we do, we'll put posters up asking people if they'd like to take part on a new thing like this, or we send out press releases. We've got a WhatsApp group, Facebook page. So it was all the usual routes to generate interest, and of course it was discussed at the town council meetings, and at that time the town council Facebook page was very active as well. You'd often see, that was before the Facebook algorithms changed, so many posts would often have about 800 people seeing them. So we had quite a nice reach through all of those different routes.
Yes, I think Brace has got quite a good sort of infrastructure, community infrastructure, hasn't it? So it's able to get its message out quite well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I suggest now that we move on to Rolly, because some of these questions, they're all quite closely related. So I'm sure some of the same questions can crop up after we've heard Rolly. So Rolly is from Prestine, and I think is going to talk about a project that you're doing in Prestine there, Rolly. So can I hand over to you?
Yes, thanks. Hello, everybody. Apologies, I'm not in view because can you hear me well enough if I have
we
my...
can hear you fine, Rolly, yes.
Good, okay, thank you. So I'll just briefly go through what we call Verges for Nature in Prestine, which was the initial thing that happened here. In 2019, I found some orchids in the Verges under one of the green sites, if you like, in Prestine. And residents and local councillors discussed the importance of biodiversity and the timing of mowing regimes, so that this would increase habitats and food sources for wildlife, adding to national nature recovery networks. In 2020, the Verges were monitored by local volunteers, and hand-painted signs used to indicate different species and raise some local interest, and they were very popular. And a leaflet was made available to schools and public for identification of 20 of the wildflowers growing there. This was underneath what we call the Warden. It's the old castle site with a lot of trees, and both sides of the bypass, which looked particularly rich and varied. Just to put in here, this did come up a lot about who owned what, because in Prestine along our bypass, a lot of people consider the Verges or the roadside grass to be theirs, when in fact it isn't. It's PCC owned, and they're responsible for the urban and rural Verges. So who we've been communicating with a lot is Brian Price of PCC, who's in charge of highways and the mowing regimes. In 2021, Norton was included in the scheme because there were banks and similar smaller Verges showing a good variety, but they've been cut too early to thrive. And overall, more species were appearing, and the Radnorshire County Recorder for Wildflowers began to visit and document her findings. We had the first sighting very excitedly of a pyramidal orchid, but we haven't managed to see it for the last couple of years, unfortunately. And volunteers from the Verges group, and also the Warden Guardians, as they call, raked off the cut grass. In 2022, yellow rattle seed or plug plants actually were funded by Preston and Norton Town Council and planted out on the verges considered to have the most potential. Obviously, that's to reduce the vigor of the tougher grasses, which compete with the wildflowers. Yes, it does all take time, but along with reduced mowing, clearing of the cuttings afterwards, or the arisings as they're officially called, and identifying which verge is best to work with, was beginning to have an impact. And in 23, that management was seen, yellow rattle was thriving, encouraging more cowslips, primroses, orchids, bird's foot, trefoil, vetches, knapweed, and others. And we liaised and still do with a lot of the other local green spaces groups, including the Warden Guardians, Pristine Tree Group, which recently established a new nature reserve just by these verges, so it's part of the corridor effect. Caring for God's Acre were involved for a while, and Guerrilla Gardeners, Radnorshire Wildlife Trust, all sharing ideas, skills, and knowledge. Unfortunately, at the end of 23, the Preston and Norton Town Council had a bit of a hiatus in terms of management and what was happening. I liaised a lot with county councillors within the council and some of the council about these regimes, because there were people in the town that didn't really like the wild look, shall we say. They rather like the neat and tidy. And Martin is smiling. We've had a long conversation in the past, and it can be problematical at times. And it was also difficult to get across this thing that they don't actually own the verges. One or two may be privately owned, but generally speaking, Powys do own them. And we've been kind of within liaising with the town council and Powys County Council, kept our own thing going really, but this hiatus, as I said, within the town council was difficult. And we had maps which we would look at and identify which verges had the most potential. These were then given to the contractors. Now, yes, this is one of the biggest difficulties, I would say, because there's this tier of what happens and communication. And so because the contractors are different all over Powys, they cover different areas. Ours come from Penabont. Getting the message to them was quite difficult, but to be fair, they did their best. And if we put up signs or went to talk to them, they go around flowers and things. And then some of the local population would complain that they hadn't done it all quite as neat and tidy as they hoped. Sigh. We have two roundabouts, which Caring for God's Acre have done a lot of work on as well, but that also has gone by the by because there's been disagreements as to the management of them. So that's changed. We were very disappointed that the town council decided actually that they only wanted one verge to remain that we'd been doing this work on. And that was, I think, at the end of 23 and 24. And then with the help of people who discussed with Powys County Council about all this, Powys County Council decided themselves that in effect they would maintain and look after the verges, which they did anyway. Either they be making the decisions. They anyway were going down to changing the regime from cutting from 3 times a year, which had been reduced in 2018, I think, from 4 to 3. They were reducing them all to 2. And that fitted in quite well, generally speaking, not always, but with what we're trying to achieve. And so, as far as we know, that will continue to happen. So actually the verges that we were looking after are now being looked after by Powys County Council. They have a cut and collect machine. We managed to get them the first time to do our flat areas 2 years ago. It's not always ideal timing. Otherwise we do a lot of raking off after the other mowing has been done by the contractors. There's probably more I can say, but I'm aware there's other people on the call wanting to speak, so I will stop there. Yeah, I'll just stop there and you can answer more questions or get in touch with me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Rolly. That's brilliant. Are there any questions that anyone's got they want to direct to Rolly? Fiona?
Sorry, it's me again. I'm doing a lot of talking. We've recently had a lot of discussion. I'm on a community council. I live in Llanbrynmire, and I don't know if you're aware, the A470 is closed at the top of the main road through, and the small traffic has been diverted through the village. This part of the village, Llanbrynmire, is very big and very spread out, so the traffic is coming through Bont. A lot of people have houses quite close to the road, and they have put stones along the road. This has caused enormous amounts of our council time discussing this. And our clerk has looked into it, and she, and along with the county councillor, have found that it's not a question that the council don't officially own it, but neither do the person who lives in the house. The first meter apparently is a right of way that was set up when carts were coming along, and people, pedestrians had to be able to get out of the way. So it's come up with us because there's a lot of people who put the stones along to save the Verges from this huge amount of traffic. And apparently that is illegal. It is actually illegal to put stones along your verge, and therefore the same with plants, because they could cause a serious problem for somebody having to get off the road in a hurry. And I think there was even question because we had somebody who had a puncture. They were driving a big lorry with a minibus with disabled people, caused by hitting one of these stones. And the question came up was, well, can they claim on the council insurance? And no, they can't. It's down to the landowner, because that meter is a vague area. So I'm interested that Rolly has found with her research that actually the council own it, because through our discussions with the county councillor, Powys are definitely keen to say, no, they don't own it. They have a right to keep it clear for safety of the road users, security of people walking along it. That's what I found out. I just put that out there because it has taken up so much of our time over the last 6 months and beyond, because we had another problem up another road with farmers arguing with neighbours. They brought it to the council because they didn't want these big white stones. The council response was, we're not going to come along and enforce this law to say you've got to remove them, because there are so many, particularly because of this road diversion, that it would take up too much of their time. But it was very interesting to hear that the first meter officially is a right of way and has the rights and duties of the landowner as with any footpath right of way. I just put that out there. Sorry if it's been so contentious and difficult in our community council and for our community, which is a very big area. I mean, it covers 9 hamlets. It's a really big parish, so we've got a lot of Verges. Anyway, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's interesting. Understanding precisely the ownership and right of way over this is quite important if we're going to create more of these Verges in this way.
It is really difficult because if people take on planting things, or caring or encouraging the insects, and then the council just come, or they subcontract, and it's often the subcontractors who say, oh, I'm just here cutting, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just cutting it down a bit.
It would be quite useful to actually capture and archive somewhere the learning that you've obviously gone through there, so that other groups can be made aware of the same information.
Yeah, I'll do that.
We did mark our verge with the orange painted sticks to make it really clear where the cutting line was and where it should not be, just to be helpful really as much as anything. That sounds very traumatic what you've gone through.
Rolly, do you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks. It really depends. It sounds like in that particular situation, so along the bypass here, it's highways, it's a main road, and also to say that the meter matters in a sense that always they have to do safety cuts, and they do those extras around corners and things if it's coming up to T-junctions. And they have to do along any verge, well, they do here anyway. They always do a meter, even if they're leaving the rest of the cutting, because they have to decide which the safety things are, and they're obliged to do that. But in some places, I said, there will be private ownership still owned by Verges, particularly up lanes in country places. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rolly. Right, I'm going to move us along because I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we're supposed to be keeping to within an hour, which I suspect we won't make this time. But we'll move along. So the next speaker is Sorrenta King from Radnor Wildlife Trust. So thank you, Sorrenta. Can I pass the baton to you, please?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'll keep mine short and sweet, don't you worry. I'll just share my presentation with you. Is that working?
Not yet, but yes, it is. That's fine.
Fantastic. So I'm the Why Adapt to Climate Change Project Officer and Farm Advisor for Radnorshire Wildlife Trust. So I work everywhere from Hay upwards in the Upper Wye catchment, sort of focusing on climate resilience and the landscape scale change. But I'll be chatting mostly about Verges, obviously, because that's why we're here. So our Verges are home. Oh, is it not moving on?
It's not moving on now at the moment.
That worked?
Yeah, there's some more text. Yes, that's moved on.
Wonderful. So our verges are home to over half of the UK's wildflower species. So that's about 720 different varieties, all from oxide daisies to red cambion, bluebells, and lesser celandines, bringing a vibrant colour to our roadside verges. We work on landscape scale resilience and connecting different areas together. One thing that's amazing about our road verges is that it covers over 300,000 miles of the UK and over 200,000 hectares of land. So it's making it one of the largest nature reserves and wildlife corridors that we've got in the UK, meeting our 30 by 30 goals. So these interconnected verges are fantastic for our little pollinators, our bees and butterflies, creating these refuges away from different land management techniques, away from the pesticides, and being able to support and feed them at different times of the year. And we're focusing mostly on the implications of droughts and flooding events and the increase of the frequency. So we're trying to work with other communities to try and increase the diversity of the wildflowers and other species within the verges to be able to mitigate climate change and try to reduce the effects that we have in the local area. It's also fantastic for our ground nesting birds and some of our rare varieties that don't do too well on intensively managed land. So not only do they provide a wildlife sanctuary, but they also provide diverse root structures and can increase the water infiltration, nutrient uptake, and even begin to mitigate the pollution in a local area. So I've pinched these photos from a lot of the beautiful wildflower verges around the UK. And these wonderful diverse verges contribute to the grass and permanent pasture habitats, and so they can store up to 34% of all terrestrial carbon stocks. 90% of that is stored in the root biomass and soil organic carbon. And when you've got species-rich verges, they can increase the soil organic matter. And by increasing the soil organic matter, even just having 1% soil organic matter in your soil, it can store up to 185,000 litres of water. So just think about the 300 miles of verges that we have and how much water that is storing and how it can work to mitigate the flooding and other pollution effects in the area. We have particular issues in the area with road runoff and pollution from lorries transporting organic materials, even the soil transferring it between different areas of the country, introducing invasive species and things like that. But with these beautiful verges managed by fantastic members of the local communities, we can try to mitigate this and we can intercept the runoff, and with the deeper rooting structures they can increase the infiltration, so hopefully all of that pollution, that diesel, the foreign soils can all be brought down into the soil itself, hopefully cleaning itself over time and being able to mitigate it. But we can't do anything without your amazing work that everybody's doing in the local communities. So we do have to connect these up. It's fantastic that you all are working in different areas of the country, and we need more people like yourselves to be able to connect these up to increase our landscape scale resilience. We need to petition Powys County Council and other authorities to be able to let multiple people be able to go out, even if it's not your local verge, but be able to connect these areas together to be able to create those sustainable wildlife corridors. Fiona will probably talk about more about what species are present and how you can help, but I wouldn't be Radnorshire Wildlife Trust if we didn't plug to become a member. So you can hear about all of the fantastic work that we do, being able to mitigate climate change in the local area and increase the wildlife and nature, and make sure that the Verges stay one of the biggest nature reserves that we've got in the UK. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Sorrenta. Anyone got any questions on that? Andy, you got a question? You might have to put it in the chat. We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh,
Hooray.
Finally. In fact, sorry, I didn't really have a question. I was just putting a thumbs up really in terms of saying, hey, I can't think I can speak, but also all the good stuff that that we've heard. I do quite like the bit that you ended with really around the connectivity of grass verges, and that we're stronger together in terms of supporting the natural environment. So that's a really good point, I think, for us to consider.
Yes, definitely, especially in Powys when we don't have many people. So we need to make sure that we connect our communities together.
Thanks, Andy. Right, Eva, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Sorrenta. How closely does the Radnorshire Wildlife Trust work with other ones? Because I'm a keen member of the Montgomeryshire Wildlife Trust.
Yes. Yeah, so we work quite closely with local communities. So we've had different projects through the years. Some projects have focused on getting other community groups talking to each other and working together. That's something we're trying to push forward again, is getting other organisations to chat to each other. So Landor, Prestine, Raider, Hay is making sure that everybody doing fantastic things in their little local area know what other people are doing and try to support them in sort of getting that communication between everybody.
No, what I meant was, do you work actively with Montgomeryshire? Because we're adjoining areas. Sorry, I'm a member of the Montgomeryshire Wildlife Trust, and I wondered, whether you do a lot of work with us? I don't get involved, obviously, in the admin. I'm just a card-carrying member.
Yes, so each little trust is sort of an individual body in itself, but we have had some collaboration with Montgomeryshire. We mostly have collaboration with Herefordshire, our adjacent neighbour that way. So we're trying to, well, my current project is obviously working throughout the wide catchment, so from Radnorshire all the way down to the Wye Valley National Landscape. So we're sort of doing it diagonally. But there's definitely scope to sort of work between other areas of Powys.
I noticed that Fiona has put something in chat about that as well. But shall I suggest that we move on now to Fiona anyway, and you can maybe sort of touch on that as well, Fiona, as well as what you're going to cover, and then there can be more questions generally at the end that can be addressed at any of the speakers. So Fiona, can I ask you to do your presentation now, please?
Right, hopefully this will work. Is that working?
Yes, we can see it, but there's the sort of other bits around.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Bit on slideshow.
Is it working? Sorry. Oh, there we are. Sorry, it wasn't. Nothing was happening. I was clicking. Nothing was happening. Hi, I'm Fiona. I'm the local wildlife sites officer for Radnorshire Wildlife Trust, based at Radnorshire Wildlife Trust, and I cover the whole of Powys. I worked on roadside verge project 20 years ago for 3 years, and did surveys of the sites that we didn't have volunteer wardens for. So yeah, I'll talk about Powys Verges. So hopefully this doesn't cover what Sorrento said too much. I wrote this presentation. I was asked to do a 15-minute presentation for the conference last year. So hopefully it's not slightly too long. I've taken out one slide. Restoring flower-rich habitats along our road network ensures the survival and natural spread of both common and rare species for their own sake, for the sake of the wildlife they support, for the environmental benefits they bring, and for all important contact with nature. The adoption of a few basic principles will significantly improve the biodiversity on our verges, help reduce costs and carbon emissions, and bring benefits for wildlife for us and for future generations. Oh, hang on, I can't see the word. I'll have to move the picture, I can't see it. There we are. With over 97% of wildflower meadows destroyed since the 30s, road verges are a vital refuge for bees, butterflies, birds, bats and bugs. A good verge will supply a diverse source of nectar and pollen from the first celandines in February to the last devil's bit scabious in September. Bird's foot trefoil alone is a food plant for over 130 species of invertebrate. I think Sorrento covered that bit. So 700 species of wildflowers, that's 45% of our total flora. Road verges are home to many familiar wildflowers that are now becoming threatened, such as harebell, which is found at Franksbridge, field scabious and ragged robin. Some 87 species of these are threatened with extinction or are heading that way. So there's approximately 5,500 kilometres of surfaced roads in Powys, and the associated road verges provide a valuable habitat for many species. Since I wrote this presentation last year, I found out that the Roadside Verge Nature Reserve project doesn't exist anymore, but the areas are still managed for wildlife. So Powys had over 100 road verge nature reserves. They're managed separately, and it's a length of road verge that has been identified as having particular value to biodiversity. So they may support protected and nationally and or locally important species, or support a diverse range of plant species. So these verges are subsequently managed in a specific way, informed by the 3 wildlife trusts in Powys, with the aim of conserving and enhancing the species of interest. So there's 42 areas identified for nature. This is from the 2021 inventory. I don't know if it's changed since then, but so in Radnorshire we've got maiden pink, common century, ploughman's spikenard and common milkwort, which is found at Puckpatty. Lowland grassy verge is the most widespread. A good example will be home to meadow flowers such as cowslips, oxeye daisy, scabious clovers, vetches, knapweed and meadow cranesbill. Flowering exuberant, they can support magnificent displays of orchids, especially the various spotted orchids. So common spotted is found at Plaswarren, Crossroads and Downton. And marsh orchid species, also pyramidal, as other people have said, and early purple orchid, which is found at Dolly Jenkin. Dolly Here Quarry has bee orchid. Thanks to the infertile soil on the best verges, the sward is thin and short with delicate grasses like sweet vernal grass, quaking grass and crested dog's tail, allowing plenty of room for other flowers to grow. On the best verges that are cut later in the year, yellow rattle can help to keep the grass down. Upland grassy verges, such as those found in Wales, are often wetter and more acidic than their lowland counterparts, sometimes resembling rare upland hay meadows. Devil's Bit scabious, Cumbach Llethrid, is characteristic, along with wood cranesbill, bistort and melancholy thistle, which is found at Pantador and Crochan. Excuse my Welsh, by the way, I'm only level 1, so I might not be saying it quite right. These verges can support large populations of heath-spotted orchid and northern marsh orchid. Such verges tend to grow more slowly and are usually cut late in the year, although unenclosed verges are often grazed by livestock from surrounding hills and moorland. Heathy verges are found on dry, poor soils in lowland areas of Wales where roads pass through areas of heathland, or more widely in upland areas. Such verges can provide colourful displays of heather or ling and bell heather, along with gorse and bilberry, and flowers including tormental, heath bedstraw and sheepspit scabious, which is found at Kevin Kenilworth and Nantmill. Since their growth is quite slow, these verges are not cut annually. They're usually unenclosed and are often grazed by livestock from surrounding land. Wooded verges can be magical in spring with flamboyant displays of woodland flowers along shaded lanes under a canopy of leaves. Primroses, bluebells, which are found at Glade Street and Plaswarren Crossroads, celandines, wood anemone, ramsons, greater stitchwort and violets all herald the arrival of spring, along with the early purple orchid, which is found at Llanelwedd, nestled amongst the ferns. Later, foxgloves and red campion continue the show, and in a few places in the west, rarer spreading bellflower, which is found at Dollyhere Quarry, can be found. Grasses tend to grow thinly in the shade, so if cutting's needed, it's usually done in June and July when the spring flowers have set their seed. Damp verges and ditches can be found at all altitudes and provide a different type of floral display. In the lowlands, the vegetation can grow quite tall and lush, almost like a fen in character, with ragged robin, meadowsweet, and purple loosestrife interspersed between rushes and reeds. In the ditches themselves, deeper water plants can thrive, such as yellow iris and hemlock water dropwort. On poorer soils in western areas, damp verges can be home to Ross pasture, characterised by rushes, world caraway, lesser spearwort, and sneezewort. By contrast, the wettest verges in the uplands can even resemble bogs, with mounds of sphagnum moss home to insectivorous sundews and butterworts, along with bog asphodel and cottongrass. Even urban grassy verges can have significant potential. A rich tapestry of small flowers can provide a much-needed nectar and pollen hit. When well managed, they can brim with daisies, dandelions, trefoils, vetches, self-heal and yarrow, and provide a welcome display of colour in urban settings, as we've already discussed. The newly sown verge next to the long lay-by south of Llandrindod has a lovely display of vetch and other species. The diversity of our verge flora is staggering. For example, upland verges in mid Wales with wood bettyvetch, Graig Farm and Cumbach Road, butterfly orchids, greater butterfly orchid is found at Underhill, and heath bedstraw. If we get the plants right, all other wildlife has a chance of thriving. Road verges are essential refuges for the wildflowers that support our wildlife, and their value in the fight to conserve bees, butterflies, moths and beetles cannot be underestimated. 1 mile of wildflower-rich verge can produce 20 kilograms of nectar sugar per year, enough to feed millions of pollinating insects. I can't see it under the thing. So what can you use to help persuade decision makers to make more verge management more wildlife friendly? As Sorrenta said, we can use climate change and carbon emissions. Many councils have declared climate emergencies, so implementing these guidelines will help to reduce carbon emissions through cutting less and will create more diverse and resilient verge habitats that are better able to cope with climate change. A lot of quite a few of the sort of national facts that I put on my presentation are on the Plant Life website. They have a really good section on roadside verges. Plant Life have estimated that if cutting all road verges in Britain was reduced from 4 times a year to twice a year, it would save over 30,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions. I just thought I'd put some Radnorshire rarities in, set alphabetical. So there's Adder's Tongue Fern at Graig, Agrimony at Cumbach Road, Bethany at Cumbach Clethryd, Bittervetch at Yardrow and Lower Cumgannon, Broad-leaved Hellebrine at Brunsadern Bridge, Common Century at Downton, Cowweed at Kevin Kenilworth and Abercamlow, Dyer's Greenweed at Brunsadern Bridge and Cumbach Road, False Fox Sedge at Pwchpatty, Goldilocks Buttercups at Tir Eglwys, Great Burnet at Brunsadern Bridge, Crossgates Nantmel, Cumbach Road, Graig, Lower Cumgannon and Abercamlow, Hound's Tongue at Downton, Long-stalked Cranesbill at Llandilo Grubban, Rock Stonecrop at Llandilo Grubban and Downton, and Sedum Fosterianum at Llandilo Grubban. Southern Woodrush and Forster's Woodrush is found at Brunsadern Bridge, Wild Thyme at Franks Bridge, Water Woodavens Hybrid at Nantywillan, and Wood Medic at Lower Cumgannon. So these special roadside verges can also be classified for fauna. For example, Old Radnor, Upper Hunter Farm has dormice. St Harmon has been selected for birds. Llandilo Grubban was chosen for the invertebrates as well as the flora. and some have been chosen for their fungi, lichens, and tree lungwort. So these are the sources for my presentation and further reading if you're interested. And if you'd like to keep an eye on a sort of one of these verges or do surveys or monitoring, please get in contact with your local wildlife trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I think that very well illustrates the enormous variety of biodiversity that is present in our verges. So have we got any questions for either Fiona or for any of the other speakers now, if anyone wants to ask something that has not been covered so far? Any questions, Fiona?
Only to ask, Fiona, did you say that the roadside verge nature reserves, has that been stopped? Did I miscatch that?
Yes, I asked Ben Mullen about it, the biodiversity officer, because I'm working on a different project, but I thought it still existed. But apparently they're managed as roadside verge nature reserves, but the project itself isn't sort of
Okay.
the wildlife trusts don't, as far as I know, do the project itself anymore, but they're still managed separately following the prescriptions that were set down in previous projects.
So if you had one, it's still there, but trying to get a new one set up would be more difficult. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it would just be a case of contacting Ben at Powys County Council and to set up a new one, I would have thought. So
thank you for your help.
Yes, I was quite interested in that because you said there are about 100 stretches of road in Powys that are designated as these reserves. So does that mean that for those 100 stretches, Powys have specific instructions for how the management of those 100 verges is carried out?
Yes. That the 100 may be out of date. It's just the information in the Radnorshire Wildlife Trust folder, but yes, they do have a sort of a manual with sort of guidelines for each area, because each one has to be managed in a slightly different way depending on the species. So
okay, that's very interesting to hear. Andy.
Yeah, the speakers have been inspirational. Have got my brain going in terms of ideas that we can do where I live. One of the things that came across really, and I think it was started off with the first speaker really around the lack of understanding and awareness and identification of wildflowers. And that is a major challenge, isn't it? Because you went, the last speaker went through all of the list, but we don't really understand or recognise, well, I don't anyway, different local wildflowers, what thrives, what doesn't. And sometimes we can be bombarded, can't we, with wildflower mix, and we madly go out and start putting wildflower mix into our natural environments, and some do well and some don't. So I guess the question is, or the thought is how do we encourage young people, older people generally, to understand what they've got in their backyard, as it were, in terms of the different types of wildflowers and what does well?
Good question.
This year we'll be running, sorry,
No,
this year we'll be running quite a lot of sort of volunteer days that go out and sort of upskilling people for wildflower identification in the spring and summer. So keep an eye out on our website.
Thanks, Lorenza. Rolly, you put your hand up then took it down again? Was that just to mention the same thing?
Well, no, I actually put something in chat about the roadside road verge nature reserves, because they are still happening, but I think it's really important that they're very different. They're the rural ones, that they're treated differently maybe from the ones that we're doing in urban areas, although they are starting to look more urban areas. And apparently when they came and did the planting last year in Prestine, Ben Mullen told me we were one of 33 or something that are being treated differently. And it's quite urban where they are. So I just wanted to say that too. And I think that Andy, what he's just said is really important. People don't understand a lot of things mainly they want to see in wildflower mixes, they want to see the colourful things that don't grow in verges and in grass. They want to see the poppies and the cornflowers and all the blue, and they don't want all this grass and other things alongside. But I think it's really important to find out what's already growing there. If it's already growing there, it likes it, and it'll likely come again.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Fiona.
Just to mention, I've written it in the chat. I don't know if people are aware, but particularly for the Wildlife Trust, there's been a lot of discussion recently about introducing a new GCSE in natural history, and it's just got the go-ahead. And I've been involved because my concern is it's no good waiting till their children are 14 and thinking, oh, maybe I'll do that, because they need the information. They need to know what is an oak tree, what's an alder, what's a buttercup, and what's a creeping buttercup or a meadow buttercup and a celandine and those things. And there's so much work to be done because so many adults don't know. You know, I was talking to a friend looking at the catkins. He didn't realise as an adult that that was a hazelnut. You know, we've lost so much. I feel so passionate about this. So I hope the Wildlife Trust will be able to really get involved, because it's got to start from really very small people. So all power to everything you're doing. Well done. Just something to mention.
Thanks, Fiona.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
we'll
Lots of good information. I think that's just a sort of an applause hand of yours, Andy. Thanks very much for that. So yeah, it's definitely encouragement for other communities to pick up on some of these ideas, and it'd be brilliant to see other people adopting the same sort of community schemes. Eva.
Yeah, just briefly, thank you very much. This morning has been extremely useful. 10 out of 10, thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Okay, well, we will be, sorry, go on, Penny.
Jeremy, can somebody put on the link somewhere where someone like myself, who's a complete novice, can have basic information into how to start growing wildflowers?
Right, which of the organisations here would be the best one to cover that sort of area? I'm presuming that's something that On the Verge would cover, but I guess the Wildlife Trust also would have information like that. I guess we can try and put some sort of fact sheet together after this, where we can put the links to all of the various websites that have been referenced and so on, to try and point at information. But it sounds like the first meter is probably a good starting point. If Martin said they've got a good website for information about that.
Right, thank you. I'll head in that direction then.
Can I say, Jeremy, just to say, I think the Plant Life website is brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
An introduction to wildflowers and how to do it simply is brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really good, isn't it? I think that could be
Okay,
a talk
Fiona,
for
your
Pace
hand
to
up again.
host as well, Jeremy.
Sorry, say again.
Could be a good talk for Pace to host as well. You know, what wildflowers grow where,
That's
and
true. Yes.
how you go about encouraging them.
Okay, that's not a bad idea. Yes.
And for anybody in Montgomeryshire, of course, you've got the Montgomeryshire Field Society, who go out to wonderful places and identify all the flowers they see as they go. So if you've got, you know,
That's the British Society of, no, the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
yeah.
Botanical Society of the British Isles. Yeah, BSBI. They're very good.
Yes.
And put the Field Society in. You know, if anybody who's sort of fit enough to get out and about walking, they do great site visits.
Okay, we'll try and put some sort of fact sheet together with some of this information on, because I think that would be quite useful. Sorry, Fiona.
Sorry, I was only going to suggest to Penny that a very good way to start is to actually go out into your own garden and I've forgotten the word, sort of do a survey your lawn. Sure. Just find out what, because there are your wildflowers. And I mean, I don't know what you know, but you know, for example, there are 420 different sorts of dandelion. There are something like 28 different sorts of eyebright. So you could sort of see a dandelion or an eyebright or a buttercup and say, oh yes, a buttercup. if you actually get down to sort of looking at what's on your doorstep, you start to get your eye in and realize how much more there is to know. Get a good book. There's Rose, or I know it's out of fashion, but there's the Kimball, I've forgotten his name.
There's no doubt about it. I've learned a massive amount just by listening to everybody. But what I did was I went off and bought this. And I bought some seeds.
Oh, well, there you go. Just get going.
With no knowledge at all. So suddenly I've got all these seeds and I haven't got a clue what to do with them.
Plenty
Right.
online.
Anyway, I'm going to have to draw this to a close because I've got to be elsewhere very shortly as well. But thank you all very much for coming along. So thank you to all our speakers. That was a brilliant and really useful session. So the next one next Saturday is about community woodlands. So I hope some of you will join us for that one. So thank you all for coming along, and the recording will be on the Powys Green Guide channel of YouTube, hopefully very shortly. Right, thanks very much.